Yo, Dan.
Hi, Bach.
Hi, Dr. Norton. Welcome everyone to chat with my friend Dr. Dan Norton and myself, Dr. Bach Ho. Dan and I are both PhDs in philosophy, and I was a philosophy professor for a decade. And both Dan and I are fans of Ayn Rand. And Dan has a YouTube channel on Ayn Rand, which I'll link in the description and then have Dan uh, pitch it towards the end. And we're doing another largely unplanned live stream chat. And the topic I selected is start 2026 with reading Ayn Rand. And Dan, I put an exclamation point to pressure us to be more emotionally expressive than we normally are. So let's see if that works. Um, So I'll start by saying I feel a little nervous in the moment. And what's coming up for me in the moment is I'm used to talking about organic intelligence. Yeah, on my channel. I do talk about Ayn Rand and selfishness, but usually organic intelligence. So my brain is it finds it easy to talk about organic intelligence. I haven't talked about Ayn Rand or done hardcore philosophy on live stream in a while. I know that's your specialty, so I feel nervous in this kind of new thing with you here on our second live stream. I'm just pointing that out. Not that we have to do anything with it. I'm just sharing that as the opening. Um, okay.
That actually
Oh,
that raises a question for me,
oh yeah.
if you
What? Yeah,
don't.
please.
I
Yes.
noticed on some of your videos, you say something about organic intelligence, and then after it, you say "and Ayn Rand." So I haven't heard. I might have heard little snippets of it, but I was wondering, do you actually talk about Ayn Rand in some of your organic intelligence videos?
Oh yes. And thank you for interrupting. And actually, I really appreciate the interruption and the free flow and even if we're not exactly on topic with my title of Start 2026 with Ayn Rand. Yeah, so when I'm trying to do educational content and critical commentary on organic intelligence without talking about Ayn Rand, it's just anorganic intelligence. And then when I'm trying to bring in some Ayn Rand, usually reason and self-interest, I'll bring in Ayn Rand. It's just a quick way of saying and organic intelligence or and Ayn Rand or and organic intelligence and Ayn Rand, just to give the viewer a heads up on what the content may be about. Yeah. So I am trying to think about both and integrate the two. Um, yeah, thank you for the question. Um, okay, so my I think most people in my YouTube audience come from the organic intelligence world. Um, some of them come from the Iron Man world, but probably most come from the organic intelligence world. So maybe I'll have in mind right now that kind of audience. So if I'm thinking about my title, start 2026 with Ayn Rand, with reading Ayn Rand, and I'm thinking about my audience, mainly people from organic intelligence who may not know about Ayn Rand, who may not like her and have never read her, what could I try to say to them to try to convince them to read Ayn Rand? Okay, that's my project for myself in the moment. And by the way, Dan, when I hand it over to you, you don't have to address that audience specifically. I'm just trying to address it myself. So here's what I think to my fellow organic intelligence people. I think many people in the organic intelligence and therapy world believe two things, or here are two things many of them may believe. The first thing many of them, I suspect, believe, consciously or subconsciously, is the way to solve the problems of the world is to heal yourself and develop love and compassion. So if you heal your psychological wounds, if you regulate your nervous system or heal your nervous system, and you develop compassion and love, and if everyone does that, we'll have world peace and all the problems of the world will be solved. I think that is a belief that and influences many people. So let me try to articulate it more clearly or concisely. Heal your wounds, regulate your nervous system, develop compassion and love, and that is the fundamental answer to the world's problems and peace on earth. And I don't mean that sarcastically. I mean that seriously as a belief that many people have implicitly to some degree. The second, Dan, I hope I know where I'm going with this, Dan. The second belief is I think many people believe that selfishness and unselfishness should be balanced, not one extreme or the other. They may not have a specific balance in mind, like, is it 50-50? Is it like weekdays selfish, weekends unselfish, or whatever? But whatever it is, there should be a balance of selfishness and unselfishness. So I think those are two influential premises in many people's minds, especially in the therapy world, especially in this nervous system world. The key to everything is heal, compassion, and love. And the second one is selfishness and unselfishness should be balanced. Okay. Now, what can I say to try to move these people closer to reading Ayn Rand? Here's what I have instinctively. Um, I think if you just have some understanding of history, you'll just see that there are periods of time and places where people are doing relatively well, a lot better than they're doing in other periods. Okay. So in some times and places, people are more well off. There's less war, there's less horror, there's less death, there's less famine, there's more peace. And other times there's more chaos. And that's just, if you just study history, you'll learn that. So if you really believe in the premise that it's all about nervous system healing and healing your wounds and love and compassion, you would have to have the view that well, the Middle Ages and Dark Ages, when life expectancy was low and just death was rampant, and um well, that's because there wasn't enough nervous system healing and love and compassion. And then in times where life is long and healthy and there's less war, that means there's more nervous system regulation and love and compassion. I think that's totally just bonkers, if I may say. So that's one point. I'm not seeking to prove it because proof would require like you study history and have, but I'm just throwing out some ideas. I feel like I'm being kind of all over the place, but that's the best I can do right now. So to the second idea that selfishness and unselfishness have to be balanced, I think one idea that comes from objectivism, the philosophy of Ayn Rand, is the idea of balance is not sustainable. The question is which principle is in the cultural ascendancy. So, for example, if you believe that selfishness and unselfishness should be balanced, what specifically, concretely do you believe? Do you believe 10% of your taxes should be devoted to helping the poor? Do you believe your tax should be 70% and given to the poor? Do you believe you have to spend 1 hour of your day per day helping someone, the homeless or the poor? Or is that too extreme? Should it be 5 minutes per day or should it be 1 hour per week? What counts as the balance of selfishness and unselfishness? Well, culturally, that is completely a function of which principle is currently in the ascendancy. The stronger the ascendancy of unselfishness, the more the quote unquote reasonable balance will be towards half of your income to the poor, help people 3 days out of the week, and then you can pursue your happiness 4 days out of the week. Okay, I feel like I just opened with like a lot of stuff and it was kind of messy, and so I'm just going to stop so I don't make it worse. And I'm just going to hand it over to you. And I apologize to viewers if I was just kind of sloppy, but that's where I am. That's live stream. So,
Well, maybe I'll make it even more sloppy.
okay,
So,
hopefully you will. No, save. No, what do you think, Dan? Anything that you want to do?
well, I had a variety of thoughts. A lot of issues did come up. One thing that came up early on, I think you said something like a lot of people in your audience, they don't like Ayn Rand's and they haven't read Ayn Rand's. And I don't know if you meant those together, but I was thinking, well, why wouldn't you like her? Why would you have an opinion at all about her if you haven't read her? Now, maybe you've heard about her secondhand.
Hmm.
That's she's acquired a kind of reputation, and maybe even if you haven't read her yourself, you've heard other people who you know, maybe people you respect, offer an opinion about Rand. But I guess if you're in that sort of category, I would recommend actually checking her out for yourself because I think she's often smeared, and there
Hmm.
are a lot of sources out there. Um, just one that popped into mind, Mother Jones. I think it's a left-leaning, maybe even a socialist kind of publication. And they often, I don't know if they still do, but they used to regularly or fairly often, they would publish some piece that I thought would really smear Ayn Rand. And if you just read Ayn Rand herself, you would see, a lot of this is just um, BS. It,
Hmm.
it it wouldn't. It's not a honest interpretation of Rand. So if you have a negative impression of Rand without having read her, I would highly recommend checking out Rand herself. That's really the best way to form an objective opinion of her. And this is not just true of Rand; it's with any author. Um, so that's one point I would make. And there's some other
Yeah.
points, but we could pause on that, or if you want to say anything at this point.
I no, I thank you. And I agree. Um, if if you hate Ayn Rand or fear Ayn Rand or mistrust Ayn Rand or are opposed to Ayn Rand and you've never read her, I would recommend reading her and seeing what you think. I know some people just do a quick, let me just AI search this or go to my chat and type in Ayn Rand, see what I get. Um, because she's such a deep thinker, I recommend reading her instead of trying to do a quick, give me the 10 bullet points on Ayn Rand, especially since she's challenging so many fundamental concepts that if you just read the bullet, well, Ayn Rand believed in selfishness, and then you have an emotional reaction, well, that's, selfishness is wrong, so I don't like Ayn Rand, moving on to the next thing. You really have to read her. Um, and I would add one more thing before I do want to hand it back to you because I want to, but one more point I want to make is Ayn Rand is trying to defends reason, thinking, thinking for yourself, and trying to arrive at the truth through reason, not through emotional response. And I've noticed more and more in the culture today that people arrive at their conclusions through emotional response. So I'm going to do some, I'm going to chat GPT Ayn Rand, and then maybe you get a bullet that says Ayn Rand believed that unselfishness is evil. And then you read that, oh, Ayn Rand thinks unselfishness is evil. Well, I don't vibe with that. My body does not resonate with that. So I'm out. That's out. She's not for me. It's just a quick, oh, here's a sentence. Unselfishness is evil. My bodily reaction, I don't vibe with it. I don't resonate with it. End of discussion. I'm moving on to something else. To acquire knowledge, according to Ayn Rand, we need reason. And part of what Ayn Rand is doing is trying to usher in, her fundamental is to bring back a culture of reason and thinking about things, not do I resonate or vibe with something and that will determine whether I like it or approve or favor it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and emotions are very important to Ayn Rand and in life, but they're just not the primary means of cognition or understanding reality. Um, so
Their
just to,
information, their
yeah,
information. Yeah,
yeah.
important, vital information.
And one of her viewpoints is that happiness is the highest moral purpose of one's life, or ought to be. So,
Yes.
and happiness is a type of emotion. That's how I think of it. So, but the means of getting there to that state of mind, that happy state of mind, is by exercising your reason. And just to say a bit on the topic of
Yeah,
selfishness, so
please.
she has a book called The Virtue of Selfishness. So there's an entire book that elaborates on how she understands this term. It's not the conventional way that you might be used to thinking of selfishness. Actually, the subtitle of the book is A New Concept of Egoism. So even though your initial emotional reaction might be negative, understandably, and I think she might even be playing off of this. She's counting on people having a certain conception of selfishness when they see the title. I think it's meant to be provocative, but then when you delve into the book and you learn about her new concept of egoism or her new concept of selfishness, you might have a much different evaluation than just one based that you have based on the title alone.
I think that when you said, okay, so I said Ayn Rand is advocating reason as your means to obtain knowledge, not going by your emotional reactions to when you encounter an idea. And you added, thank you for adding, you added at the same time, emotions are extremely important. And I wanted to say, lean on that, emphasize that a bit. So I, I think there's a common representation of rationality as unemotional. And Rand would dispute that, I think. And I think thinking of being rational and a thinking person as being unemotional is a very bad straw man. It's an evil straw man of rationality. So, for example, you might hear someone say, um, if someone is trying to consider whether to buy a house and the guy is thinking, um, how much is it? Is it near good schools? What are the materials? What materials is the house made of? How durable are they? And he's doing a lot of thinking about different considerations. And he also loves the house and has a strong emotional appraisal, positive emotional appraisal of the house and really likes it. Some people would say, well, the rational part is the one that's thinking about all the unemotional things, like how much does it cost? Is it near good schools? And the irrational part is his emotional response. I think Ayn Rand would say, no, that's a false, that's a wrong conceptualization. All the information is relevant. His emotional response to the house, does he like the house? How much does it cost? Is it near good schools? Is the neighborhood safe? All that is important information that should feed into the processing of what to do. So to regard emotions as irrational, non-rational, or I feel like you might attack me on that one, Dan, but we'll see. To regard emotions as irrelevant to rationality is wrong. They're crucially important data, especially because, according to Ayn Rand, your moral purpose is to pursue your happiness, as opposed to some other view, according to which your moral purpose is to serve God or follow these commandments or follow these duties regardless of your emotional consequences. For Ayn Rand, it's pursue your happiness. So you have to pay attention. What gives you pleasure? What gives you pain? When do you feel good? When do you feel bad? That's so important to rationality. You have to pay attention to pleasure and happiness and prioritize it in your thinking about what to do.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking maybe it would be good to talk about the nature of emotions.
Hmm.
So they are in Rand's view, they are products of the ideas we hold. We don't just have emotions in a vacuum. Like the emotions one has depends on the beliefs one holds. So you might have take an example where two people have opposite ideas towards the same object. So um, I don't know, Donald Trump just came to mind. So you have people like the MAGA crowd on the right who might have a very positive emotional reaction when they see Donald Trump, and then you have people on the left who look at the same guy and have a very negative emotional reaction. Now, um, they can't both be right. Maybe they're both wrong, but um, he can't be simultaneously good and non-good or bad and non-bad. That would be a contradiction. So at least one of the sides has to be wrong. Maybe both are wrong, but they can't both be right. But this is just to show that you can't take emotions as an automatic sign of what's true. Because if you did that, then you would be simultaneously saying, well, Donald Trump is a good guy and Donald Trump is a bad guy. But that's a contradiction, good and non-good.
Good.
So if you just go by emotions, then you could be wrong. What you have to do is figure out the reasons underlying that emotional response. So you could have a debate, a discussion between these people. So why do you have this positive emotion towards Trump? And then you'll hear, well, because he's standing up to political correctness. He doesn't talk in a phony kind of way. He just speaks his mind, and I really respect that about him. Someone else might have a different sort of reason. Like maybe you could vibe with that. Maybe you could say, yeah, I like someone who speaks his mind. He's not phony. Like a lot of politicians, they try to dissemble. But another person maybe likes Trump because he he is appeasing of a racist sort of base, which discriminates against people with brown skin, and he um, is okay with ICE hauling people off the streets. And then if you hear that, you say, "Well, I don't like that reason for liking Trump." So, but this is all a process of reasoning, picking apart the ideas or the beliefs that underlie the reason, and
Yeah.
then and not just having a holistic emotional response, but using your thought to parse out, what is causing the emotion in each case, and then judging that. And so I'm just trying to give some illustrations of
No,
how emotions can't be just taken as on face value as telling you what's right or what's wrong, what's good and bad. You have to think about the ideas or beliefs underlying them. And I think a lot of people are not even sensitive to the fact that there are ideas or beliefs underlying emotions, and that's something which Ayn Rand discusses. And I think, well, I guess that's enough for now. I'll just pause there.
thank you. Oh no, thank you. I want to say I'm enjoying this a lot with you, and I'm considering breaking my rule of half hour and then end, and I'm considering breaking my rule of I'm really trying to stay on topic and really provide value to my audience because I'm kind of wanting to let myself be carried away by the pleasure of talking with you. So I may be breaking my rule today of cutting it at a half an hour because I'm enjoying talking to Dan, and I may be going really free association in philosophy and moving away from the topic of start 2026 with Ayn Rand. So I half apologize if I do that, but I'm just going to go with my enjoyment of what's going on in this conversation. So let's see where we go. So you just said that um, according to Ayn Rand, emotions are influenced by ideas you have. And one clear example is people have different emotional reactions to Donald Trump. And you're saying some people think he's good, some people think he's bad. And then you're saying Rand would encourage using your reason to reflect on your emotional reaction. What's that about? Why do I think he's good? Why do I think he's bad? And then what do I think about those reasons? And what's my view on immigration? What's my view on racism? What's my view on tariffs, et cetera? Right. I think I introduced new issues that you didn't, but I was just trying to reflect that emotions are shaped by ideas, and it's important to reflect on one's ideas and assess their merits. One, I want to be devil's advocate here. One idea that's very influential, and I think influential among organic intelligence people, it's actually in the theory itself, I think, which I disagree with strongly. Here's an objection to you, Mr. Ayn Rand defender. Good and bad are concepts we need to move beyond. So some people think Donald Trump is good, some people think Donald Trump is bad. You're saying both can't be right. You're saying there can be no contradictions. And I'm suggesting to you the view that we need to move beyond polar thinking that there's right and wrong and good and bad. And maybe beyond the view that contradictions don't exist. Maybe there can be contradictions. Um, I'm going to stop there
Okay.
and see if you have a response to this influential. By the way, have you encountered this? It's very in the world of organic intelligence and therapy. Many people in the therapy world, I think they they take themselves to be enlightened. Many of them think they're enlightened, and the grounds on which they think they're enlightened is that they think they're beyond good and bad, right and wrong. They regard all belief systems as BS. And so the sign of enlightenment is to be beyond right and wrong and good and bad. And that is influential in the organic intelligence community. And I think in the therapy world broadly. And I'm wondering if you would care to apply your rationality to what I
Mhm.
just said. You know,
Sure. I think that view is self-refuting if, for instance, if you think it's good to be beyond good and bad, it seems like that's implicit. Like I have this superior, better viewpoints of good and evil, namely that there is no good and evil. Um,
mm,
so some views are self-refuting in that sort of way. Um, Maybe just to take another sort of example, I do not exist, right? Well, how can you say I do not exist unless you exist? Um, so the kind of attitude of it's enlightened to be beyond good and evil, I think has this self-refuting sort of character to it.
yeah,
And also just the idea that the contradictions are possible. Okay, well, contradictions are not possible. I can just say the contradictory of what you just said, and you have to both, if you're going to be consistent, then you have to accept that both that it's the case, contradictions are possible, and it's not the case, contradictions are possible. So I think
yeah.
your entire viewpoint just collapses on itself if you endorse contradictions. I don't think that's coherent at all, and it can't be rationally
May I build?
maintained.
Yeah, I'd like to support that. And I think a major reason for reading Ayn Rand is to expose yourself to a deep defender of reason. If there's a part of you that I'm talking to anyone who's listening, if there's a part of you that respects reason, if there's some part of you that respects reason, and you have a sense that this is an important part of you that's sacred and good, I think reading Ayn Rand will help you nourish that part. And so that you'll be more confident in using your mind, in respecting logic and understanding the value of thinking. So I would recommend reading Ayn Rand to nourish that part of you that believes in logic and thinking and non-contradiction. And to support your point that that so many people nowadays are, I'm moving on to a different sentence, sorry, that's just how my mind did it, sorry. um you have a therapist who may say there is no right or wrong, and then in the next moment she'll say it's always wrong to beat a woman. So that's just her two sentences. There is no right or wrong, and then it's always wrong to beat a woman. And this therapist won't even blush. There's just no sense that, you just said two sentences, one right after the other. You said there's no right or wrong, and you said it's always wrong to beat a woman. That's a straight up contradiction, which the therapist may admit, but then just say, that's just how it is. That there are contradictions. There's no right or wrong, and it's always wrong to beat a woman. And if we're in a cultural state where you can just say that, and you're a PhD or a PsyD psychologist, and you're saying that, and you're an adult, and and you regard yourself as a model for other people to live by, or model for your kids if you have kids, and you just say things like that, I think that's a very bad sign in your psychology and in the culture that people are just saying things that are straight up contradictory, and they're unconcerned. And if you say you just contradicted yourself, you just said there's no right or wrong, and you said it's wrong to beat a woman, you have to resolve that contradiction somehow. And they'll just say, well, that's just your logic, philosophy, airy fairy, academic BS. We're living in the world where there are contradictions. Something's got to give. I think reason really needs to be saved and defended. And I think there seem to be more and more anti-reason people nowadays. I feel, but yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
And they might, people who think there are contradictions, they might find some sanction or approval from philosophers of the past. So people maybe you've never heard of, like Hegel. He was a German philosopher from a couple hundred years ago, and he had this idea that there's this, I can't even explain it, but I'll just throw out some words. There's a thesis and an antithesis, and then they are synthesized. And out of context, this doesn't make sense. I think maybe even in context, I think a lot of people think that no one understood Hegel, including Hegel himself. Um, so this is just to say, I think there's a long tradition in philosophy in the last couple centuries, in particular, where there has been a movement away from reason and logic, and it's been argued by some philosophers who follow Ayn Rand that this sort of irrationality among philosophers has led to some of the horrors of the 20th century, like the Holocaust. And well, if you throw reason out, then if it just anything goes, if you're willing to accept absurdities, then why not have something like a Holocaust? That's a um, so. Well, there's a lot there to chew on, so I'll just stop there.
Yeah, I mean, why is it wrong to wipe out a group of people? If there's no right or wrong, then it's not wrong to wipe out a group, just straightforwardly, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, right. So yeah, it's not wrong to commit genocide, but it is wrong to beat a woman.
right, right,
And there's no right or wrong.
right.
Right. I would like to offer another reason to read Ayn Rand, in 2026. Here's a reason. She may be a powerful antidote to tribalism. Increasingly in the culture, you see more people being afraid in general and strongly identifying with certain tribes. I'm on the left, I'm on the right. Here's my Christian tribe, here's my Muslim tribe, here's my ethnic tribe, here's my family tribe. And there's this anxiety people have that they assuage by holding tightly to a tribe and consequently living and according to my tribe, right or wrong. And this increasing tribalism is a consequence of an anti-reason culture. So one value, one major value of reading Ayn Rand is and I'm by the way, I'm currently rereading The Fountainhead, and I'm getting a lot of enjoyment out of it, and it's very powerful to me. I read it when I was a teenager, 43 now. I read it several times, but this right now it feels like an amazing relief or refresher, a refuge from the chaos of today. So if you feel like you don't know who you are, you don't know what to value, you don't know what to believe, Ayn Rand is the exact opposite of a cult or a tribe because she demands that you think for yourself. And if you read her content, you have to judge it for yourself and think for yourself. That's very distinct from, are you lost and confused and scared? Here's the Bible, become a Catholic. Or here's the Quran, or here's left-wing politics or right-wing politics. She's offering a philosophical system that demands that you think for yourself. And in so doing, you will develop increased confidence in your mind, in your individuality, in your ability to choose values for the sake of your happiness. I'll pause there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, she definitely does foster that. And I think that's helps achieve self-esteem. So if you don't think you're for yourself, if you are dependent on others, you can be dependent in multiple ways. You could be dependent in a physical sort of way where you rely on other people for your food, your money, your your physical needs, but you can also be dependent on others in a spiritual sort of way, you might call it, psychologically. Maybe you're well off financially, but your opinions about things, maybe you like Donald Trump, I think, is an example of this, actually. He's a billionaire, but I think he's very dependent on other people's opinions of him. I think he has very thin skin, and he's lashing out on at people on X, and he's getting all these petty squabbles with people. He's very dependent on other people's opinion of him, and I think that's because he's not secure in himself. Um,
Hmm.
so Ayn Rand's uh, she in her novel The Fountainhead, it's the theme of it is she actually identifies explicitly the theme of the novel, and somewhere she says it's collectivism, individualism versus collectivism, not in politics, but in man's soul.
Yeah.
So we often think of a political context when we think of individualism and collectivism, and communism as like a form of collectivism, and you have capitalism, which is a form of individualism, and why that is, I don't know if we want to get into that, maybe, but I think she has a much deeper perspective on what it is to be an individualist. Fundamentally, it's not
Yeah.
a political issue. It's how you choose to use your own mind. Do you think for yourself? And that means, do you exercise your reason? This is something which is connects to another aspect of her philosophy, free will. This is our fundamental choice, according to Rand, to exercise our rational capacity or to abandon that and just um, give in to our emotions, um,
Hmm.
let our desires dictate us. Like David Hume, a philosopher, said, reason is the slave of the passions. So that's the reverse sort of view of Ayn Rand. Emotions are really what's in the driver's seat, and we're just at the whim or at the mercy of our emotions. For Rand, she says, no, our reason is in control, or at least it can be if we choose for it to be in control. And if we do, then we will form our own independent opinions that will, and that's a way of building self-respect and self-esteem. I'll pause there.
Thank you. Dan mentioned free will. By the way, his dissertation in philosophy, his PhD dissertation was on free will. My
My
PhD,
master's thesis was on free will. My
okay.
PhD dissertation was on a somewhat different area.
I
Philosophy
didn't,
of mind, the mind-body issue, physicalism or materialism versus
oh,
dualism.
crap. I didn't either I forgot or didn't know or I sorry. Okay. So his master's thesis was on free will. His PhD dissertation was on the mind body, an aspect of the mind body under the category of the mind body dichotomy. And my PhD dissertation was on selfishness. So uh, Ayn Rand's novel, The Fountainhead, is a good starting point for anyone. I would start with The Fountainhead. If you're more politically inclined, Atlas Shrugged, but The Fountainhead really gets at what it means to be an individual in the soul, and that's going to be very powerful for people, especially if you currently feel like your identity is collective or tribal, and if you're open to an alternative view on that, start with The Fountainhead for an uncompromising, elaborate, and dramatic portrayal of what it means to be an individual deep down in your soul. Uh, Rand had a concept called social metaphysics and the social metaphysician. And I don't have an official definition on me. I could look it up right now, but I'm a little bit lazy. So just off the cuff, um, a person who's a social metaphysician, and she meant this negatively, a person who's a social metaphysician is a person who thinks that the primary reality is other people, not reality itself. What's most important or what's most real is other people, not reality itself. That may be a little bit sloppy. Dan, maybe you'll attack me and correct me, which is fine. Um, so for Rand, if you're a social metaphysician, when you encounter some issue or question, are tariffs good or bad? Should we have open borders or not open borders? Is selfishness good or bad? Is there a God or is there not a God? Is there more than one God or not? Can I eat beef on Fridays? Are cows sacred? Do animals have rights? Just whatever. Just a million questions you face. If your approach is not is it true? What is true? But instead your approach is what do other people think is true? That's the mark of the social metaphysician. And one reason people may be social metaphysicians, which she regards as a bad thing, don't be a social metaphysician. How to change, if you're a social metaphysician, how do you change from being one to not being one? That's going to be long and hairy, and but bracketing that. But um, one one reason a person may be a social metaphysician is I can't think for myself. I don't know what that means. I'm scared to. I need people to tell me what to do. I need people to tell me what to think. So whenever I get a question, I'm not going to think, is it true? How do I find out? I'm going to think, what do people think of this? Do other people think it's true? And I'll follow that. Another possible motivation may be that they're taught that in life you have to integrate into the collective and not be controversial or offensive or radical. You want to be on copacetic terms with other people, and that kind of that incentivizes becoming a social metaphysician, where habitually you go to what do people think is true? What do most people think is true? Not what is true and how do I find out and know it for myself independently. I'm really going off the cuff and just kind of going with the flow of our conversation, but that's what came to mind. Just introducing this idea of a social metaphysician or social metaphysics. And the antidote to that is try to find your way somehow into thinking for yourself. And you could start with very simple things like 2 + 2 is 4. And I don't mean this comically or sarcastically. I seriously mean this. 2 + 2 is 4. You know that. You know that. Now, if people try to gaslight you or tell you it's not, or peer pressure you or manipulate you, can you hold fast to, no, I know that 2 + 2 is 4. The sky is blue. If people try to come at you saying, no, it's not, it's red, you're confused, can you hold to that? So you could start with just simple things that you know. I know this. I see the sky. I see the tree. And someone says, no, you don't. How do you know? You can't know anything. How do you know you have eyes? How do you know you exist? Prove that you exist. Prove that tree exists. If you're confident in, I know I exist because I see myself. I know the tree exists because I see it and I can touch it. You can start with simple things and really get a sense of how confident you are in using your mind as and as opposed to being as opposed to your grasp of reality being very tenuous and easily shaken by intimidation from other people. I'll stop there.
And maybe also by the arguments of some philosophers. So as you were giving these sorts of examples of very simple things,
Yeah.
like the sky is blue and 2 + 2 is 4, and this tree exists because I can touch it, I can see it. I was thinking of like Rene Descartes, who's a philosopher from centuries ago, and he said, it seems to me like right now I'm sitting by a fire writing on my parchment or whatever, but maybe this is all a dream. And we've seen similar ideas in the much more current culture. We have movies like The Matrix, in which you're in this simulated reality, but maybe you don't know. And I guess within that reality, you're offered this choice: do you want to take the red pill or the blue pill? But how do we know we're not caught in the matrix right now? Can we really know anything? So there's this kind of
Mhm.
skeptical attitude, which goes back to philosophers centuries ago, but has also come up in movies in current day American culture. And I think people have absorbed these sorts of this sort of skepticism, and that might undermine their confidence in even very seemingly simple thoughts like this tree exists or 2 + 2 is 4. Um, so maybe this is a sort of a pitch for philosophy in general as being relevant to everyone and inescapable. Um, and Ayn Rand, she addresses this sort of skepticism among many other things, but there are some very deep issues in philosophy that I think have to be resolved if you're ultimately going to have a healthy sort of psychology and not become what Bach is calling a social metaphysician.
Yeah, yeah,
Just to give a simpler term, metaphysician is kind of a, or metaphysics is a fancy
yeah, it
term
is.
based on Greek, but you could think of it as just reality. Like, do you fundamentally live in a social reality? You could think of it that way, where your fundamental orientation is to other people, as opposed to being directly connected to reality itself. Like, the other people serve as the middleman for you between you and reality, or do you have direct, first-handed contact with reality as opposed to second-hand contact reality? So there's this idea of a second-hander, which comes up in the novel, and Ayn Rand advocates against that in favor of having a first-handed approach.
Thank you. And thank you for trying to not get into like a lot of jargony stuff. I appreciate that very much. Like I refer to social metaphysician. That may not be a very familiar term, and you helped me, with rewording. Thank you. Um, I just thought of two more selling points as you were speaking for reading Ayn Rand, and I wanted to. I'll name that. I'll start with the first. The first I wrote down common sense, and the second one is start intellectual starvation. Let me start with the common sense. These are just notes to myself. So you had just said uh, it's valuable to read philosophy in general, to study philosophy in general, because your life may be shaped by premises that you unconsciously accept. Like, what if I can't know anything? And that may hurt your confidence and your ability to use your mind. So it's good to study philosophy in general. And then as you were saying that, I was thinking, now why Ayn Rand specifically? I mean, clearly you and I are both motivated because we like her philosophy, so that's why we're trying to sell it. But what's a selling point for Ayn Rand's philosophy? Here's one I I have, and I'm going to credit uh, uh, Harry Binswanger, a philosopher who follows Ayn Rand's philosophy here. Ayn Rand's philosophy, I think, if you study it, I think you may find it's commonsensical. I'm scared of using that term because I don't know what exactly I mean by it, but let me just continue. So I'm talking to my audience now. You may think right now Ayn Rand is like a radical, extreme, weirdo philosopher and deviation from what's commonsensical or normal or plausible to me. But in fact, if you study her, you may find the exact opposite. What does she say? Actually, what are current what do many people think is true and quote unquote commonsensical now? They think the world was created by a cosmic ghost There's another dimension out there which you do not have access to. When you die, you may go to this other dimension and it may be wonderful and wonderful and you're having orgies with virgins, or you may be burning for all eternity. You may not eat cows. You may not if there's a cow that's on the road, you have to wait for it to move away before you drive on. Um, you can eat fish on Fridays, but not meat. You can't have sex before marriage. You can't have gay sex. You have to do what's right, not for any consequences to you or anyone, but just because it's right. To know what's true, pray. To get good results for yourself, pray. I'm just giving you some examples of ideas that people find very plausible. And it, maybe some part of you, I would say the rational part, can think this is kind of weird. All these ideas that I just listed are kind of weird, actually, even though many people accept them. And if you read Ayn Rand, you may experience this, well, holy crap, this is like common sense. What does Ayn Rand say? Reality exists. It's here before you. The table is real. The wall is real. The tree is real. The sky is there. How do you obtain knowledge? You use your senses. You look at things. You touch things. You observe and you think. What should you do? Live your life. Find your happiness. How should you interact with other people? They should live their life, pursue their happiness. You should live your life, pursue your happiness. And whatever relationships result from those things happening is what should be. If you want to hang out with them, you hang out with them. If they want to hang out with you, great. If you don't want them in your life, fine. So each person lives and pursues their happiness, and social relationships are determined from that fundamental. How should we organize politically? Let each individual live his or her life in freedom to determine their own course of life. I think that is pretty common sense. I know that term is a little bit slippery, but here's reality. It is what it is. Study it. Learn about yourself and the world. Pursue your happiness. Let others pursue their happiness. Protect everyone's freedom to pursue their happiness. I think that's quite common sense, as opposed to organize your whole life to sacrifice it to earthworms and dirt or a cosmic ghost that will burn you for eternity if you don't obey his commands. I mean, that is not common sense. That's just totally fucking arbitrary. All right.
Oh, it looks like I might be frozen on the
Oh, you're
screen.
frozen. Okay, sorry.
Okay. Well, at least my voice is not frozen.
Yeah.
That's
Oh, you're
okay.
back. You're back. Yeah.
I unfroze. So,
So
yeah,
we're really,
comments.
yeah. Go ahead.
Uh, I was thinking, what exactly is common sense? Does that
Yeah.
just mean like what the average person holds at a given time? But if you think about if that's what it means, like the common sense of the Middle Ages could be a lot different than the common sense of today. Like I don't know if in the Middle Ages maybe it was common sense that the Earth was flat. I mean, I don't see it curved, and you just look out, it just
Yeah.
looks like basically flat. Maybe there's some hills here and there, but to think it's like a huge ball, and if it were that, why aren't people just falling off it? And isn't it just obvious that the that the Earth is flat? And of course, today, like everybody knows, it's the Earth is round, and now the flat earthers they're ridiculed, right? And that's just this crazy fringe minority. So, what is this is also reminding me of the point about emotions. You can't take emotions at face value as being an indicator of what's right or wrong, what's good or bad. Likewise, I don't think you can take what's quote common sense if that just means like what the average person holds. That also doesn't it's not an indicator of what's true or false, um, as evidenced by people what people
Yeah.
consider to be common sense at a given time is gonna be contradictory. So now I know you. I'll
Yeah.
just say one
Yeah.
more thing,
Yeah.
and then I'll stop. I remember from reading your dissertation or part of your dissertation that egoism is a, I don't know if you use the word common sense, but a non-crazy sort of viewpoint. And I don't, and I mean, I think you might have said some things in your last segment that were gesturing towards that view,
Mm.
but I just wanted to mention that that source, your dissertation, in case that triggered some more examples or relevant thoughts on this topic of common sense.
I no, I think damn you, Dan, for for challenging me intellectually. No, thank you. So I yes, when I suggested that Ayn Rand's ideas are common sense, I acknowledge that many people, well, someone may say, well, that's just your view, Bach. I mean, there are very smart people out there, PhDs and philosophy professors who will say, it's common sense to me that God exists. It's just obvious to me and common
Something
sense.
can't come from nothing, right? It had
Yeah,
to come
something,
from
yeah, there
somewhere.
had to, consciousness had to be first before existence. So that's just common sense. So you think, Bach, that it's just common sense that you just start with reality and you don't have a God unless you can prove it. Why is that common sense? My view is common sense is you just have to, I mean, God is just common sense to me. And you, Bach, you think that living for yourself is common sense, but I think that's bizarre. I think common sense is look at the salmon who died trying to give birth. I mean, common sense is self-sacrifice. So I get, yeah, I would be, I would get a flood of criticism from different people saying that, well, their view is common sense, my view is not common sense. So acknowledging that and not trying to defend myself against them, I will still say that many people, when they read Ayn Rand, they will come to have this emotional experience. I'm not saying emotions are a guide to truth, but I'm just reporting that you may have this very pleasurable emotional experience of this makes a lot of sense to me. It's my life. Here's the world. I'm going to pursue my happiness. Other people should do the same. And relationships that happen from that are good ones. People, when they orient in that direction, they often have a feeling of this makes total sense, as opposed to we're all just sacrificing for each other or for God or for earthworms and no one's really happy. So
Yeah, well, it makes sense, I think,
yeah,
is
okay, okay.
maybe different than common sense. So it can make sense without being common sense. I mean, maybe this just comes back to the issue of what is common
Yeah,
sense.
yeah.
Maybe I should look that up in the get a common sense dictionary definition of common sense. So yeah, if it just means like the average person's opinion, I don't know. Is that? I mean, I'm curious how you would define it if you
I
had
didn't
to.
have, I wouldn't, I think I'm going to dodge you on that one. I don't have the,
Okay.
yeah, but I, I would like to move on to my second point here in favor of reading Ayn Rand, unless you wanted to continue with something.
No, let's go.
Okay. So I may be running out of steam, so I may want to close that after this, but we'll see. Let's see. Maybe we'll get into something that's exciting, but I feel I'm not as used to long form conversations as you are. But here's my second point, and I'm not sure how many points I've made across this live stream. There's no way I can tell, and so it's all over the place. I know. Um, I wrote down intellectual starvation. So why read Ayn Rand? I think many people are starving intellectually. Just like you can be starved of food, or you sometimes hear, I'm starved of touch, or I'm starved of social connection. You can be starved intellectually, where you are suffering from extreme lack of intellectual stimulation, and specifically intellectual stimulation concerning fundamental issues of life and your place in the world. Starved of that. What creates the conditions for starvation? One contributing factor is we're told not to offend other people. When we're in social situations, prioritize social harmony over offending people or making people uncomfortable. That's a big norm that's preached. Keep the peace socially. What's the consequence of that? The consequence is when you interact with people, you avoid anything potentially controversial or uncomfortable. What's the consequence of that? The range of conversation topics narrows considerably. Oh, how's the weather out there? Oh, where'd you go on vacation? Oh, the range of conversations, which and those conversations are great. I mean, pleasure's good, small talk is good, enjoyment's good, but the range of conversations that avoids controversy and discomfort is very narrow. So people get used to, well, that's just what social connection is. It's just using your mind in a way that's not offensive or controversial or discomforting to others. And that incentivizes not thinking. Maybe you can think privately, like I'll think privately, or maybe I'll go on Reddit and have some philosophical debates. But in terms of like just socializing, quote unquote, normally in everyday contexts, the range of topics is very limited, and people get used to thinking, okay, then it's used to like a non-intellectual or anti-intellectual or non-philosophical, anti-philosophical way of being. And that is a state of starvation. Wouldn't it be glorious if it were normal and socially acceptable and socially encouraged to think about fundamental issues and to bring that up in conversation without fear of offending people or discomforting people? That any discomfort from that and offense just is the price of the glory of turning on your mind and thinking about deep things and doing it with other people where they don't just change the topic or say, well, there's no right or wrong, or let's talk about the weather, let's talk about sports. I think that many people are starved intellectually, and a value of reading Ayn Rand is to nourish the mind when it's in starvation mode, to discover the power of philosophy, the pleasure of philosophy, specifically philosophy in how it can aid pursuing your life and happiness. Um, Pausing there.
Okay. I was thinking
Yeah.
as you were talking about how some people say like avoid religion and politics if you're
Yeah.
well, I guess in various contexts, like in dating, for example, sometimes the advice is given to there's just some third rail topics which you don't want to bring up because in well, in politics itself also there are certain issues like the Democrats and Republicans they'll debate over how much taxes there should be, but not over whether there should be any taxes at all, or maybe how to adjust the Social Security program to address the trillions of dollars of um, debts that the U.S. is in. But we're not going to talk about whether there should be any Social Security at all, whether there should be any welfare or Medicare. We're just taking it as an axiom, so to speak, that there has to be a welfare state, and I think that's the wrong approach. It's not addressing fundamental issues. Uh,
Mm.
I don't know if it's somehow ties into this issue of starvation, but I do think that's a lot of the cultural discussion that's had is not dealing with fundamental philosophical issues, and that it's really important to address fundamental philosophical issues. Um, so, well, go ahead. You want to jump in?
Yeah,
I
I
see.
think when I talked about I was more focused on like a, an experience of lack of intellectual stimulation, specifically from thinking about fundamental ideas. Your point, I think, is more important, which is the value of thinking about philosophy is to arrive at the truth for the purpose of living your life. And of course, yes. And I was also trying to motivate that a bit by saying you may feel yourself starved for intellectual stimulation, and philosophy, and specifically Ayn Rand, is a great antidote to that. You know,
Yeah, if you are feeling starved for intellectual, philosophical, deep stimulation, yeah, I do think Ayn Rand is a great source of that. I think she's a wonderful salesman or saleswoman for philosophy. I mean, if you just comparing the way she writes, she's an artist. She's not just a philosopher. She was a novelist. She's actually best known as a novelist. So she has an amazing way with words, and I think your experience of philosophy as a subject, I think, is colored a lot by who it is that's introducing you to the subject.
yeah.
So if you just if you say, oh, I'm gonna take some university philosophy class and I'm gonna read some, I don't know, some Marx and some Heidegger and some Kant, and um, there's a lot of philosophers which you could read, which I think um, might leave you somewhat disillusioned and upset, unsatisfied with philosophy. But I would encourage you not to immediately generalize and say, well, philosophy is a bunch of obscure nonsense. Ayn Rand has a very different approach to philosophy,
Yeah, yeah.
and you might find it very refreshing compared to what you might find from many other philosophers. So I'll just put that in as a plug for her, for Ayn Rand. Aside from her particular ideas, the content of her philosophy, just the way she writes, the clarity of it, as well as the passion. So we talked about reason and
Yes,
emotion before.
yes.
I think there's tremendous clarity to her what she says, as well as passion in how she says it, which is very rare to find among other philosophers, even philosophers that she herself admired, like Aristotle. Was She thought very highly of Aristotle, but his style is very difficult. So I would not recommend going straight to Aristotle if you want to get an introduction to philosophy. I think a lot of his writing is very cryptic. Some of it is just lecture notes that are passed down. So maybe it's not, a fault of his. We don't have all of his original
Yeah.
writings. But anyways, I want to say Ayn Rand is a great introduction to the subject of philosophy as such, apart from her particular philosophy. And she has an article called Philosophy Who Needs It, which is free online, which is actually the very first thing I ever read by Ayn Rand.
Interesting.
And I love that it's not geared to people who are already fans of hers, who've read Atlas Shrugged. It was delivered to a general audience. And that was my hook into her. And then I just read more and more of her, and I loved it. So I would recommend that in particular if you're interested in the field of philosophy.
Thank you. Um, you're frozen a bit. Hopefully it clears up in a moment. Um, I'm running out of steam, so I'll start to close out, but I'll give you I'll hand it over to you for final words. Um, the topic here is what was it? Start 2026 with reading Ayn Rand. This has been long for me. I know you're used to multi-hour. This has been long for me, and I don't even remember what all I said, so I don't feel I could even summarize what I've said or what you've said, or so just in the moment, why do I think you should consider reading Ayn Rand for 2026? Okay. Um, she defends selfishness unapologetically. You may get benefit from learning about that. She defends using your mind and thinking for yourself. You may find that interesting and valuable. She defends a deep, thoughtful view of the world and your life and pursuing your happiness with strong conviction. You, the audience, may find that valuable. Her writing is top notch. Her fiction writing is top notch. Her stories are top notch. You get absorbed. She changes lives. If you at all feel any kind of, I need inspiration, I need challenge, I need to think deeply, I need to figure out what I want from life, I need to know if I'm wasting my time, I have X years left to live, what should I do with it? If you're in any kind of near of deep curiosity or struggle, she may provide a lot of interesting ideas for you to consider. That's my that's my summative content on Read Ayn Rand for 2026. And I will put a link to Dan's YouTube in the description. And then Dan, final words from you. Sorry, I don't have more enough stamina for how long you can go for, but any final words from you for now? Yeah.
I like your summary final statement there. Just to echo one thing you said, I her fiction I do think is top notch, and it's very enjoyable just as a experience in itself. So a lot of the value from Rand's is
Yeah.
like that you would get from her nonfiction is I think it gives you a lot of valuable perspective on the world, which you can implement in your life as you learn more about her philosophy. And so there's a lot of value going forward in your life to gain from Ayn Rand. But if we're just talking about the experience you get right now in the moment, like you would get when you go to a movie, it's just an enjoyable experience. I mean, it can be, at least potentially, if it's a good movie. And I think Rand's fiction is like that. It's just an enjoyable
Yeah.
experience right now. Savor the moments. There's additional benefits, down the line in the rest of your life, which I think it has, but that's not its primary purpose. The primary purpose is to just provide an aesthetic experience, and I think it does that in spades. And there's a tremendous value to be had there.
I I think I would recommend her novel The Fountainhead as a starting point with the organic intelligence audience in my people who are in the organic intelligence world or the therapy world or the healing and growth worlds or even the spirituality world. I think the Fountainhead would be your most pleasurable introduction to her ideas. And I think you will love the story, and I think it will challenge a lot of your beliefs enjoyably. So if you're interested in starting with her and you're wondering where to start, I would start with the Fountainhead. And I'll do one more back to Dan in case you have a specific one you would want to recommend, or different ones for different audiences. Any opinions there?
No, I think Fountainhead is a great place to start. It is long. I don't know, 800 pages, something like that. She has a much shorter work called Anthem. So if you're not up for something that long, maybe you could try a Anthem. You could read that in a few hours. But if you are up for a longer read, yeah, I think Fountainhead is maybe the best place to start.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. And Dan's YouTube information will be in the description. And this was a growth edge for me. I mean, I'm not used to these longer things. And hopefully